guys, my name is Cheyenne. I'm going to walk you through the basics of soldering today so that you could get going on all your electronics projects and all the other fun things you have planned. First, I'm going to kind of walk you through all the gear I have laid out here that you would need to start any basic soldering project. So the first thing is going to be your solder gun. You can see here it is kind of flashing 212, which is not really a good temperature to start soldering. But here with the soldering gun, if you shake it, it'll bump up to about 600, which is the temperature we're going to want to use today. This is also a tip cleaner, very necessary to clean off the unwanted solder from the tip of your gun in order to kind of keep a clean project going. Over here we have a bunch of different color wires. I like to have a bunch of different colors so I can color code my circuit boards. That way I know exactly what's positive, negative, and anything else that I have going on so I don't get lost in all of the wires. Next, I have helping hands. These are essential in most soldering projects. They're normally very small and dainty, so I like to use helping hands to kind of hold my work in place so that way I can use both hands fully with the soldering to make sure that nothing goes astray. Here we have a proto board. This is what I'm going to be soldering on today. This has positive and negative lines as well as just a bunch of numbers and letters. The numbers and letters kind of help you keep track of exactly where your work is, so that way you can also go online and you can create diagrams about what work you're doing, so that way you can keep everything straight. And the positive and negative, of course, help you keep all your power sources very straight and clear. This is a solder sucker. We're going to go over this in just a bit. This is going to help you, so if you make an ugly solder, you can kind of get rid of that work. The really cool thing about these is the tip of this is going to be a material that's not going to melt. So I can put this right up to the tip of my soldering gun when I'm trying to take away some work, and it's never going to melt or ruin any of my soldering work. Next, I have a flux pen. Flux pen is going to be used to kind of clean off my soldering area, make sure everything's clean and ready to go so that no other variables can kind of ruin my solder in any way. I have wire cutters. They have all different sizes for all different gauge of wire. I will be using just this very tiny wire today, but this obviously goes pretty large. So you can kind of use this for a lot of different projects and a lot of different gear. And last but certainly not least is the solder, kind of the key ingredient. This is going to be what's actually going to be melting to keep our project in place. First, I am going to kind of walk you through a good and a bad solder and kind of show you kind of some tips and tricks that I've learned over the years to make sure that you are off to a good start. It does take a little bit of a steady hand in order to do this, especially on such a small proto board. So it definitely takes some practice. Alright guys, so I'm going to take a look at my solder. I'm going to flip over the board. The idea is that you want to have a nice solid solder all the way through. You guys might also be able to see the pads and then the traces. So the pads are going to be the little circles. The traces are going to be what connects each circle together. It is very important that you're only going on one pad. If you go on another one, then you're going to create a circuit that you don't want, and when you connect your power, you're probably going to short circuit your work. Next thing I'm going to show you guys is how to tin a wire. And when tinning a wire is basically, I'm going to take solder and apply it all over this wire so that they stay twisted together that way and they can't disconnect. Before I do that, I'm going to use my flux pen to kind of clean off this wire. All right, and again, I'm going in at an angle. This feels a little bit like painting because you're spreading the solder all over the tip. So now you can kind of see the difference. I have tinned this side of the wire. See, it's all one silver color, while this one can still disconnect and kind of be a bunch of different wires. So just a way to make sure that my work is nice and clean by tinning the wire. The process of using the solder sucker is I'm going to heat up the solder that's already in the joint. I'm then going to, this kind of looks like a big syringe. I'm going to press in, and then as it heats up, I'm going to press this black button and it'll actually suck all the solder into here. You do every once in a while have to clean out these just to make sure that there's not any buildup. If it's acting a little funny and for some reason it's not working, I suggest cleaning it out. There's probably just a block in there somewhere. So I'm just applying that heat. Looks like it got, until I see that it is gooey. So it looks like on one side it worked. I'm going to flip this board over in order to get it all that solder out on both sides. You can solder on either side of the board. It's totally up to you. All right, so I'm heating that up, And again, remember, this won't melt if you touch it to the tip of your soldering pen, which is super helpful. All right, so now you can see, we can see through that hole again, and that solder is all gone. Now I'm just going to do one little project for you guys to show you kind of how the wiring would work on a proto board with soldering. I'm going to use one of these little LEDs and a little resistor and a AA battery to light up this, this LED. I'm going to solder it to the board. So an important thing to remember about LEDs, obviously the long leg of the lead is always going to be positive. You can see I have bent back these legs so that they'll now stay in place, so that way when I go to solder, they're not kind of falling all over the place. It's not one more thing for me to hold on to. And I'm going across. So across this proto board, those lines are not connected, only up and down. So I'm gonna lay this LED across so that positive and negative can be on two separate lines of this proto board. I'm gonna flip this proto board over, and I'm gonna actually solder from the back end, so that way it's just a little bit prettier and I don't have to fight this LED light on the end of it. All right, so again, I'm being very careful to only get one pad, not go into any other lines as not to short circuit my proto board. So it does not matter which side I put this resistor on. This resistor is just gonna restrict some of that current coming through so my LED light is not blown by this battery. So I'm gonna decide to put it on the positive end of this, but either end, they are omnidirectional, does not matter. I'm gonna fold back those leads and solder them again. Solder those in place. All right, now if I've done a good solder, these won't be able to move or come out. See, I wiggle them and they don't go anywhere. That's a great sign of a good solder. Earlier I said I like to kind of color coordinate those positive and negatives. So I'm gonna make black my negative and red my positive. Now hopefully this battery has energy. Well, maybe it does not. Sure, so after it did not work with these tiny AA's, I decided to look back. I checked all of my circuits and made sure I didn't have any cold circuits, anything was really loose. Everything looked good, so I decided that, oh, it must just be a battery issue, so I went up to a 9-volt, and as you can see, it now lights up wonderfully. So now you guys are all set to solder your own projects. Have fun.